Mia had always loved sleepovers, the fun, the food, the stories, the late-night horror games that made her laugh till her stomach hurt. She had been to dozens of them through middle school and never once had anything truly creepy happen, not until that night, not until the one. She would never forget the one that started with a stupid horror movie and ended with her staring into the black. Hollow underneath the bed, wishing she had never come. It was Carly's house, a beautiful white house on a quiet street, the kind with trimmed lawns and peaceful dogs barking in the distance, the kind where nothing ever goes wrong. Mia arrived just before sunset with her purple backpack and her favorite pajama pants printed with tiny stars inside. Were 3 other girls, Carly of course, and Jenna and Liv, all 4 of them 14, and giggling over scary movies and makeup and candy that would keep them up till morning. The living room was cozy, the pizza was already ordered, and Carly's parents were leaving for the night, which made everything feel a little more exciting, a little more dangerous, and Mia loved that feeling until she didn't. They picked a horror movie at random, something about a haunted house and a girl who vanished inside a mirror. It wasn't very scary, just weird, the kind of movie that gets under your skin slowly without you noticing. By the time it ended, they were laughing again, tossing popcorn at each other, and taking turns on Carly's phone making dumb dance videos for TikTok. Everything felt normal until the power flickered just once and all 4 of them froze and stared at the lights. They came back on after a second, and everyone laughed it off. Carly said the house did that sometimes, especially when it was windy, and Mia nodded even though there was no wind outside, and the trees were still, and the air felt heavier than usual, like the room had exhaled something she couldn't see. They decided to move upstairs to Carly's room, a big soft space with pillows on the floor, fairy lights on the wall, and one large queen-size bed they were all supposed to share. They played truth or dare for a while until Jenna dared Liv to tell a ghost story, and Liv smiled and said she had a real one. Her cousin had told her one about a girl who vanished from her bed during a sleepover in this exact town years ago, and when the parents came to wake the girls up in the morning, they found one empty bed and one strange message carved into the wooden floor that said, "I am still here." Mia laughed nervously and asked if it was true, and Liv shrugged and said probably not, and they moved on to other stories. But Mia noticed that her hands felt cold, and she didn't like how the room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were closer than they had been before they all fell asleep around 2 in the morning, or at least Mia thought they did, because when she woke up in the dark, everything was quiet and she could hear the slow breathing of the other girls and the faint hum of the night outside. But then she heard something else, something she couldn't explain, a soft tap from beneath the bed, not loud, not sharp, just a single knock, soft like the tap of fingernails against wood. She held her breath and waited. Maybe it was nothing, maybe it was a dream. But then 13 minutes later, it came again, a second knock identical to the first, and her heart began to pound because this time she was awake, really awake, and she knew what she had heard. She whispered Carly's name, but Carly didn't move, neither did Liv or Jenna. All 3 slept peacefully like nothing was wrong, and Mia turned her eyes toward the floor and wondered if she was going crazy. She checked her phone, the time read 3:03 a.m. and she watched the minutes pass with growing dread, and when 3:16 arrived, it knocked again, exactly the same, and she couldn't take it anymore. She leaned over the edge of the bed and whispered hello, but there was no answer, only silence. Then her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It simply said, "Stop looking," and her blood ran cold. She jumped out of bed, heart thudding, and pulled out the flashlight on her phone and shined it under the bed, expecting dust and shoes, and maybe a forgotten sock. But what she saw made her body lock in place and her breath vanish. There were fingernails, not hands, not arms, just long pale fingernails pressing up from under the floorboards, like something was trapped underneath the bed frame itself, pushing upward through the wood gently, rhythmically. Every 13 minutes Mia stumbled back and dropped her phone, the light flickering as it spun across the carpet, and when she looked again, there was nothing, no nails, no movement, just floor. Woke the others or tried to, but they were unresponsive, eyes closed too deep in sleep as if something held them there. And when she screamed for help, her voice didn't sound like her own. It echoed like it came from inside the mattress, terrified. She grabbed her backpack and ran to the door, but when she opened it, she didn't find the hallway. She found Carly's room again perfectly. The same, like she had never moved, and the others still sleeping, and the bed still waiting. She tried again. And again, opening the door, turning on the lights, even climbing out the window, only to land back on the floor beside the bed, over and over like the house itself was looping around her. Finally, she sat against the wall and cried, whispering, "Please, let me go," over and over until the knock returned, and this time it was louder and followed by a voice, a little girl's voice, soft and raspy, that said, "Come see what I found." And Mia couldn't help it. She crawled to the bed and reached underneath and felt something cold and hard, and pulled out a small leather diary. She opened it, and the first page said, "Property of Charlotte, age 9. The same girl's name from Liv's story. And the second page said, "I hear them now every 30 minutes. They talk to me." And the last page said, "I live under now, you will too." The bed began to rise, slowly lifting without sound, inch by inch, revealing a black pit beneath it. No bottom, no light, just emptiness. And from inside it, the voice whispered again. "Mia, Mia, Mia." Mia screamed and threw the diary across the room, but it flew right back into her hands, and now the pages were blank, and the room was changing, the lights flickering, the walls warping, the photos on the wall melting into shadows. She climbed onto the bed and screamed for help, pounding on the walls, calling her parents, calling her friends, calling anyone. And then suddenly the other girls sat up at the exact same time and turned to her and smiled with eyes that weren't theirs and mouths that moved in sync, and they said together, "You heard her, now she hears you." And then the floor vanished and Mia fell and kept falling. And when she landed, it was soft and silent, and she was under the bed in a space that should not exist, and the only light came from the open diary, still glowing in her hands, with one final sentence written in fresh black ink that read, "You are 30 minutes from becoming me." Was supposed to be just another fun weekend, just another harmless night of stories and soda and ghost games, but for Ethan and his friends that night would never end, not in memory, not in silence, not even in the dark. Because once you see a face outside a basement window and realize it is yours, you never truly sleep again. Ethan was 17 and smarter than most. He did not believe in ghost stories or chain letters or basement legends, but he loved sleepovers, especially at Ryan's house, because Ryan lived way out in the countryside where there were no neighbors for miles, just woods and fog and old barns and a cellar that looked like it belonged in a movie that no one finishes watching. Plan was simple: 5 Guys Pizza, 2 horror movies, some dumb local legend called the Basement Boy, and a lot of trash talk. At midnight they were going to summon the ghost just to laugh at how fake it all was. They didn't believe it, but that was the fun. The story went like this: long ago, a boy named Caleb was locked in the basement by his own family during a storm. They say he banged on the tiny window for hours before the water rose, and no one ever opened the door. Some say he still bangs from the other side. Some say if you say his name 3 times while staring at your own reflection in the basement window, he appears behind you and you vanish without a trace. They laughed, of course, because it was stupid, because it was perfect, and at exactly 1 a.m. they all went down into Ryan's basement, armed with flashlights and chips and sarcasm. They stood in front of the small dusty window that barely showed the outside world and said the name Caleb 3 times, and then they waited. Nothing happened at first, except for the light outside flickering. Then they heard it, just a tap, not loud, not fast, just a single soft tap on the glass from the other side. Ryan laughed and said probably a branch, but when they looked outside, there was no tree, no wind, no movement, and the field beyond the window was still as a painting. Then came another tap, then another, this time in a rhythm, like a pattern, like something trying to speak without words. And then came the voice, low, soft, broken, from outside the window, and it said Ryan. Ryan turned pale and asked which of them said it, but they all denied it. And then the voice said it again, this time, Ethan. And now he was scared, really scared, because it was his voice, exactly his own voice, whispering his name from outside. The window of a basement that sat 6 feet below the ground with no way out. They ran upstairs, laughing nervously, and blamed the speaker on someone's phone. But no one had touched a phone in 30 minutes. And when they checked the recordings, there was no sound, no voice, only static and silence. They decided to drop it, eat more pizza, and play video games until they forgot about it. And it worked for a while, until 3:17 a.m. when they heard footsteps in the kitchen and found nothing there except 5 glasses of water already poured and placed on the counter, even though of them had done it, and one of the glasses was cracked with the name Caleb scratched into the side. They checked the door, it was still locked, and the windows were shut tight, and no one had come in or out. And then they heard laughter from the basement. Soft, distant, the sound of children playing hide and seek, and then the tapping began. Again, Ethan grabbed his flashlight and said he was done. He was going to prove it was all fake and stormed downstairs, and the others followed, but the basement was different, colder, darker, wider somehow than before. The walls stretched out, the ceiling taller, and the small window now looked too big, as if it had grown, and from outside the glass, they saw a figure standing perfectly still watching them. It looked like Ethan, same clothes, same face, same hair. But the eyes were wrong, completely black and empty, and when it smiled, its teeth were cracked and bleeding, and it raised its hand and mimicked every move Ethan made perfectly. Ryan screamed and turned on the lights, but they blew out instantly, and the flashlight flickered and died. And in that split second, the figure was gone, and in its place was a photo taped to the glass. A photo of all 5 boys sleeping in Ryan's basement, taken from inside the house, and no one had taken it. They ran upstairs again, but the house was silent too. Silent, no electricity, no phone signal, no clocks ticking, only the sound of breathing. Not theirs, not human, but slow, deep breath, like something enormous hiding behind the walls. They tried to leave, but the door opened to a hallway that should not exist, a long, narrow corridor filled with doors, all slightly open, and from each one came a whisper. Ethan, come see, come back, come play. They turned around, and the basement door was open again, and the light inside was on even though no power was running, and the stairs had changed, now made of stone with names carved into each one. Ethan, Ryan, Caleb, Daniel, Josh, all of them in perfect order. One of them ran Daniel, or maybe Josh, no one could remember later, but he made it up the stairs and into a room that was not part of the house. And when they found him again, he was staring at a blank wall, eyes wide, mouth open, not speaking, not blinking, and on his neck was carved the word mine. The others gathered around him trying to get him to speak, but all he did was whisper, Caleb, Caleb, over and over, until they covered his mouth and carried him outside, only to find that the outside was gone, replaced by a field of mirrors, all showing different versions of the basement, and in every mirror, a different boy stood watching, smiling, whispering names. Ethan looked into one mirror and saw himself alone in the basement, tapping on the window, calling his friends' names, begging them to come down, and the longer he stared, the more he felt like he belonged in that reflection, like the him in the mirror was more real than the one holding the flashlight. Ryan pulled him away and said they needed to break the mirrors or close their eyes or burn something, anything. But then one by one, the mirrors cracked, and from each one, a voice emerged and said, "Thank you." They opened their eyes and they were back in the living room, or something that looked like it, but the windows showed nothing but black. The clocks were frozen at 3:33, and Daniel was gone again, only his shoes left behind, and the word Caleb burned into the carpet. The rest of the night passed slowly, painfully, without sleep, without hope. The taps never stopped, the voices never stopped, and when morning came, the sun never rose. The house remained dark, the world outside never changed, and the basement door was always open. And sometimes late at night, Ethan still hears tapping, sometimes on windows, sometimes on walls, and sometimes inside his own head. And when he looks into a mirror and says his name, he no longer sees himself, sees Caleb, and Caleb smiles. The strangest part was that no one even noticed she was gone. Not really, not Until hours later when the sun was already up and the laughter from last night had faded into yawns and cereal crunches and half-asleep faces, glued to phone screens, and even then, it did not feel real. It did not feel like panic yet, it just felt like maybe she had left early, maybe she had something to do, maybe she had told someone and they had simply forgotten, but no one remembered hearing the door open. No one remembered the sound of footsteps. No one remembered the quiet goodbye she would have given before disappearing. Her name was Kayla Quiet. Shy, always sitting at the edge of every group photo, always the last to speak in a room full of louder girls, but sweet, always there when someone needed a hug or a silent friend or a partner to just sit and listen. She was invited to the sleepover mostly out of kindness, not because anyone really knew her that well, but because the host felt bad and because Kayla had lost her mother 2 months ago, and everyone thought maybe it would be good for her to be around people again. The apartment was small but warm, 7th floor in an old building that creaked when the elevator moved and rattled when the wind blew, but nothing that ever felt dangerous, nothing that ever felt haunted. Not until after Kayla vanished. That night they played music too loud, sang songs off-pitch, tried makeup they found on discount, and spilled nail polish on the rug while laughing so hard one of them snorted root beer through her nose. Everything felt normal, full of life and distraction and late-night snacks until around 2:30 when Kayla began acting strange, quieter than usual, eyes glassy, like she was hearing something far away, something no one else could hear, and she kept staring at the closet. At first they teased her, said she was just tired, maybe high on sugar, maybe thinking of her mom, and she smiled like she agreed, but her smile did not reach her eyes, and she kept glancing at that closet every few minutes, as if it would open on its own, as if something inside was trying to breathe through the wood. They all eventually drifted off to sleep one by one, and when morning came, Kayla was simply gone. Her blanket still folded, her bag untouched, her shoes still by the door, as if she had never been there at all. They called her phone, no answer. They called her dad, no one picked up. They messaged her on every app and received nothing except one message 3 hours later from her number that just said, "I am still here." At first they thought it was a prank, maybe someone took her phone, maybe she was being dramatic, but the messages kept coming, one every hour, always the same: "I am still here. I am still here," until one of the girls finally replied, "Where are you?" And the response came instantly: "Inside." They asked inside what, and there was no answer, only a photo sent moments later, a photo from the night before taken in the dark from behind them, and in the corner, barely visible, was Kayla crouched in front of the closet, her face turned toward the camera, eyes completely black. They screamed, deleted the message, blocked the number, but another one came, this time from an unknown contact, and it simply said, "I never left." Terrified, they searched the apartment again, every room, every cabinet, every closet, and when they opened Kayla's bag, it was filled with photos, not of her family, not of her friends, but of the apartment from every angle, photos taken at night, from the corners, from the ceiling, from under the beds, and in every photo, the same shadow stood beside one of the girls, always behind them, always blurry, always watching. They went to the police, who found nothing, no trace of Kayla, no activity on her bank card, no pings from her phone. And when they checked the security footage from the building, there was no record of Kayla entering or leaving, no footage of her arriving to the sleepover, no footage of her leaving in the morning. It was as if she had never existed. The group tried to forget, moved on, tried to live their lives. But strange things kept happening, phones ringing with no caller ID, mirrors fogging with her name written in reverse, voices whispering at night, sounds from inside closets, even when they were sealed shut, and one by one, each girl began losing sleep, seeing things in reflections, hearing her laugh from other rooms, and waking up with scratches on their legs, shaped like letters, shaped like her name. One of them, Alex, tried to burn the bag with all the photos, but the fire refused to catch, no matter how much lighter fluid she poured. The flames never touched the paper, and instead the fire alarm rang at 3:33 in the morning, and her phone lit up with a new message from Kayla's Number saying, "I warned you." Another girl, Rachel, began drawing in her sleep, filling pages with symbols and maps and diagrams of the apartment, none of which she remembered making. And when she followed one of the maps, she found a panel behind the closet, a secret space no bigger than a crawl hole. And inside she found something wrapped in Kayla's hoodie, a mirror, a phone, and a note that simply read, "Do not look." Inside she looked, and then she screamed, and she has not spoken since the last girl. Ellie tried to move to another city, changed her number, blocked everyone, but still received a letter in the mail hand written in Kayla's handwriting that said, "You said I could stay over, remember?" She moved again, changed her name, threw away every memory of that night, and still every time she passed a mirror, she would catch a glimpse of a girl standing behind her just for a second, just long enough to remember. Because Kayla never left, because some sleepovers never end, because when you invite something broken into your home, it does not always go away. Sometimes it stays inside, sometimes it becomes you. It was supposed to be a weekend of cousins together in the old family house, a place they had not visited since childhood, when things still made sense and the nights felt safe and the shadows still obeyed the sun. But time had changed everything, and the house had grown older in ways that were not natural, in ways that whispered and creaked in languages no one should understand. And now 5 teenagers stood in the hallway of a place that once held their memories and realized they were not alone. Sophie was the oldest, the one who always tried to keep the group calm, the one who laughed first and screamed last, and who never believed in ghosts or stories or warnings from old relatives, especially not the one about the locked hallway that was always cold, even in summer, the hallway that their grandmother once said led to nowhere. They arrived on Friday, unpacked, ate leftover spaghetti, and argued over who would sleep in which room until Sophie picked the master bedroom and dared anyone else to fight her for it. But that night, as the storm rolled in and the trees outside beat against the windows like they were trying to warn them, something happened, something impossible, something no one could explain. The hallway changed. It was past 2 in the morning when Sophie stepped out to use the bathroom and noticed the wall beside the linen closet was gone, and in its place stood a narrow hallway, dimly lit and ending in a single wooden door with a brass knob that looked untouched by time. She thought maybe she was tired, maybe dreaming, maybe remembering something from when she was younger. And the layout of the house had been different. But when she reached out and touched the knob, it was cold, too cold, and the moment her fingers wrapped around it, she heard a voice from inside the room say her name, not a shout, not a whisper, just a single word spoken like a memory. She stepped back, heart pounding, and called for her cousins. But when they came, the hallway was gone again. Nothing there, just the same wall and the linen closet and the hum of the fridge from down the hall. They laughed and told her to sleep. They said maybe the pasta had gone bad, maybe she was dreaming. But Sophie knew what she saw. She could still feel the chill of the knob in her fingers long after the door had vanished. The next night it returned, but this time they all saw it, and this time they all heard the voice, and it said all their names, one after another, slowly, as if reading them off a list. And when they opened the door, they found a room. None of them remembered ever being in a room filled with old toys and a crib and drawings on the wall, in crayon, all of a girl with no eyes and a mouth sewn shut. They should have closed the door and walked away. They should have sealed it forever or burned it down, but instead they stepped inside, one by one, drawn by something they could not explain. And once they were all inside, the door closed by itself and vanished from behind them, and the room grew darker until only a single light bulb above flickered and buzzed. Sophie turned to say something, but the words never came out, because standing in the far corner beside the broken crib was a girl with long dark hair and a white dress and skin that looked more like paper than flesh, and she looked exactly like Sophie. The cousins backed away in silence, and the girl did too, mirroring their every move, every gesture, every blink. And when Sophie raised her hand, the girl did the same, with a smile that was too wide, too wrong, too knowing. And then she spoke. "You left me here, Sophie." Sophie shook her head, said she had never seen this place before, said she had never been here, said She had never left anyone behind, and the girl just tilted her head and said, "Then why do?" "I remember your voice," one of the cousins said, tried to open the wall where the door had been, but the wall was now solid and cold and pulsing like something alive, and the toys in the room began to move on their own, spinning, crawling, rattling, until the air felt electric and wrong. Then the mirror cracked. There was a mirror above the crib that none of them had noticed before, and it split down the middle slowly, and behind the cracks were faces. Their own faces, twisted in fear, screaming silently, pounding on the glass, like they were trying to escape from the other side. And one by one, the cousins began to see things, see memories that were not their own memories of this room. Memories of being trapped, of calling for help, of hearing Sophie's voice, telling them to wait, telling them to be quiet, telling them she would be back soon. Sophie screamed, said it was a lie, said none of it was real. And the girl with her face said, "But you dreamed of this room. When you were 8, you told your grandmother about it, and she told you never to speak of it again, because it was not your memory." And Sophie remembered. She remembered the fever that summer, the strange dreams, the shadowy corners of the house. She could never explain the way her grandmother would lock certain doors and light candles at night and pray in a language Sophie never understood. And she remembered drawing a picture that looked just like this room and taping it under her bed and forgetting all about it, until now one of the cousins collapsed, clutching her ears and crying, saying, "Make her stop, she's inside my head, she's using my voice." And another backed into the mirror and vanished completely. No sound, no scream, no trace, just gone. And in the mirror, a new reflection appeared, one that smiled and waved. Sophie grabbed a toy from the shelf and threw it at the mirror, and it shattered, and the room shook, and the girl screamed, not with her mouth, but with her eyes and her presence. And the walls began to melt, showing more rooms behind, more cribs, more drawings, more doors, each one leading to another version of the same nightmare. The girl said, "You cannot leave until you remember, until you believe, until you bring me back." And the light bulb flickered and went out, and everything went black. When they woke up, they were back in their rooms, morning sunlight pouring in, birds chirping, and pancakes on the stove, like nothing had happened, like the night had been a dream. But no one spoke, no one smiled, no one touched the food, because they all remembered, and the room was gone. But Sophie's reflection in the bathroom mirror smiled when she did not did not believe the stories, not truly, not in the way children believe in monsters or how broken people believe in angels. He only believed in patterns, and something about the pattern of these stories made his skin crawl, like invisible hands were turning pages in a book. He did not want to read, but could not stop reading. Every night he would find another sleepover story posted online, shared in forums, whispered in threads, written like warnings from people who never posted again. And the names kept repeating, the cities, the houses, the times. Always 3:33 a.m., always mirrors, always voices, always doors that never should have been opened. He had read about the girl under the bed, the boy in the basement, the girl who never left the room that wasn't real, and something inside him began to twist, because the more he read, the more he remembered things that should not be. His memories, like waking up as a child and seeing someone sleeping beside him who looked just like him but with eyes too wide, or hearing his own voice calling for help from inside his closet, or drawing doors on his wall in black marker and waking up to find them open. He thought maybe he was going crazy, maybe it was trauma, maybe sleep paralysis, maybe some online virus of fear infecting his dreams. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. And the final proof came one night when he found a note tucked under his pillow in handwriting that was not his, that said, "You are the last one." And then the power went out. He ran from room to room, calling his parents, calling his sister, but the house was silent, dark, still, like it had been abandoned for years. And when he opened the front door, he found not his street, not his yard, but a hallway lined with photographs of strangers, screaming, frozen in time. And at the end of the hallway was a mirror, and in the mirror was himself, but not himself, because this version smiled before he did. He stepped back, and the hallway behind him stretched impossibly long, and from within the walls came voices, dozens of them, Familiar and strange, overlapping, whispering, crying, laughing, and he heard the names Mia, Ethan, Kayla, Sophie. All of them saying the same thing: we never left, we never left, we never left. Ran blindly, turning corners, opening doors, finding only more rooms from stories. He had read the basement with the broken window and the stairs with names carved into them, the bedroom with a bed that hovered above a black void, the room filled with drawings and mirrors and toys that bled when touched. And in every room something waited, something that knew him, something that remembered him. In the kitchen he found 5 glasses of water already filled, and each had his name scratched into the glass in different handwriting. And one was cracked and still warm, and when he touched it, he saw flashes of other nights, other sleepovers, other lives, all ending the same way, with a door closing behind him, and no one ever waking up. He screamed, and the sound did not echo. Instead, it sank into the floor like water into dirt, and from the ceiling a string dropped with a note attached, and it said, "You were always part of this, Eli." And when he looked up, there was no ceiling, just more hallway, more mirrors, more eyes watching from inside, reflections that no longer mirrored anything. Ran again through a door that should have led to the backyard, but opened into the room from part 1, the one with the bed and the diary and the tapping that came every 30 minutes. And the moment he stepped inside, he heard it once more, that soft, gentle knock, and a voice say, "We have been waiting for you." Eli shouted that he was not one of them, that he had only read the stories, that he had never been to any of those places. But then the diary opened on its own, and on the first page was his name, and on the second was a list of sleepovers he had attended, including one he barely remembered when he was 6 and stayed at a cousin's house and woke up with blood on his pillow and a mirror that had cracked without being touched. He turned the pages, and each one told a different story, and in each one someone disappeared, and in each one the final line was the same: "We never left." He threw the book across the room and ran for the stairs, and found himself in the basement from part 2. In the window now showed not the outside world, but a reflection of himself pounding on the glass, and on the glass were fingerprints, not his, and behind his reflection was a boy with black eyes and a mouth that never opened and never closed. He climbed the stairs and reached a hallway where he saw the girl from part 3 standing with her phone in her hand, and when he tried to speak, she vanished and the phone dropped, and on the screen was a message from his own number that said, "I told you not to read." And the moment he picked it up, it began to ring, and the voice on the other end said, "Your sleepover started years ago. Eli, did you forget?" Dropped the phone and stumbled into the final room. A room filled with mirrors, and every mirror showed him sitting in a different room, reading a different version of the same story, and each version ended with him realizing it was too late, and the final mirror did not show him at all, only darkness, and in the darkness something breathing, something moving, something waiting. He fell to his knees and said, "Please let me go, please let me wake up, please let me go home." And the mirrors all cracked at once, and the voices spoke as one, "You never left. Eli, none of you did. You all opened the door, you all stepped inside, you all stayed. You were always meant to stay." And then he was back in his bed, morning sun streaming through the curtains, birds singing, his phone beside him with no messages, no calls, no signs that anything had ever happened. But when he looked in the mirror, his reflection did not look away, and that night when his friends asked him to come to a sleepover, he smiled and said, "Sure, I will bring the story this time." And somewhere beneath the floor something knocked gently once every 13 minutes, and the reflection smiled again. The end.